Hello, I'm Young-Gu Kang from Dreamy Foundation. The title of today's talk is Fearfully Made Body, Wonderfully Made Life. Last time, we learned about God's love by observing the universe. Today, we will look at the human body. Have you heard the expression, fearfully and wonderfully made? This might be the first time for many of you. This expression means that there is something curious and profound. This is found in the Bible. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. When God created us, He created us fearfully and wonderfully. This is beyond words. It means mysterious and beautiful. In Genesis 1:1, He says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Do you believe in creation? God created this earth and the universe. And the most important thing is, He created you and me. He also created your beloved family members. He also created all of you who are listening to this lecture. It is very important to believe in this fact. There are two pictures here. Which one do you think is designed? If something is created, it means it is designed. Which one do you think is designed? Though the one on the left looks beautiful, do you think it's designed? No. The object on the left is a result of the wind and weather. What about the one on the right? It is obvious that it has been designed by someone with a purpose. When Korea made the World Cup semifinals, someone has built it for a commemoration. In the same way, if something is designed, that means that someone has designed that thing with a purpose and plan. It's a beautiful car, right? This has also been designed by someone, right? And this beautiful car is a result of that. The Lotte World Tower is the same. Each story has been designed by someone. The builder just built the building according to the blueprint. Frank Muller is known to be the most intricate watch ever. This watch is worth $3 million. Each part in the watch has been designed by someone, and each of that part is significant. In the same way, if you see an object, you can know the design. If God created humans, then there should be a blueprint, right? This blueprint is called the DNA. No one denies that the DNA is the blueprint of human design. Let me introduce you to a bacteria, which is a microorganism. This bacteria has flagella, which helps it propel forward. Look at this. It looks like there's a motor attached in the tail, right? This is called a protein motor. If you draw this structure in detail, you can see that the design is very precise, just like a motor. This is made of protein. This motor can rotate clockwise and counterclockwise. It also rotates 10,000 times per minute, which is expressed as 10,000 RPM. In your car's dashboard, you can check out the car's RPM. A car's RPM revs between 2,000 to 3,000 RPM when driving 100 kilometers per hour. You can check your car later. Even for a car that is made with such precision, it is difficult to rotate 10,000 times per minute. In terms of design, it adds a lot of pressure when the RPM goes up to 7,000 to 8,000, but this protein motor rotates 10,000 times a minute. There is also a part called a clutch, which transfers power. It can even propel in a forward and backwards motion. It even has the power to propel 60 times the length of its body in a second. When you see the flagella attached to the motor, do you think this was designed? Or was it made by accident? It was designed. Do you believe that this was made by accident? There is an interesting documentary that grabbed my attention. Evolution is not about designing with engineering in mind, exploring for the best possible design, but about the seemingly best decisions made by our ancestors in ancient ages, which made us live with the wrong design, even when proven wrong as time went by. Then the documentary explains about another ridiculous design. It explains by giving an example about the airway and the esophagus. The airway and the esophagus actually intersects in the throat. The documentary states that this is wrongfully designed because of the intersection of the airway and the esophagus. When food goes down wrong, then it blocks the airway. And a lot of people die this way. Because of this wrong design, one has to take proper measures. By hugging a person from the back and hitting their back, or for a child, you have to turn them over and hit their back. And it explains why the throat is wrongfully designed. Why then does the documentary state that this is a wrong design? This is how evolution explains it. When a fish came out of the water in order to become an amphibian, it now tries to live on land. Then the gills had now changed to breathing through the nose, right? During that time, some fish made a hole in its head, while some made a breathing hole on its back or stomach. From an evolution standpoint, which fish has the higher chance of survival? It's the fish that developed a hole on its head, right? Statistically, this fish will have a higher chance for survival. And because the fish that had developed a hole on its head survived, this resulted in the intersection of the airway and the esophagus, and that was how humans took on the design for breathing. Think about this. Is this design truly a ridiculous design? If a person died from tripping, are the legs then a wrong design? No. There is a purpose and reason for such a design. If the intersection of the airway and the esophagus is a wrong design, then if it doesn't cross over, it would be a good design, right? What would happen if the airway and the esophagus were separated? What would happen if the food goes down straight to the stomach, and the air goes down straight to the lungs after passing the nose? Think about it. What would happen if these two were separated? I asked some students, and these were their responses. First, you wouldn't be able to speak. Think about it. Would you be able to speak if the two were separated? You are able to speak as the wind in your lungs passes through the airway and the esophagus and rings the vocal cords. This is how you are able to sing as well. You would die if your nose gets plugged. The mouth's function is not just to eat, but it is also helps the nose breathe when the nose is plugged. That is why you can breathe through your mouth even when your nose is plugged. You wouldn't be able to exercise actively as well. If you run out of breath during exercise, you breathe through your mouth. This is possible because the airway and the esophagus intersect. Most importantly, you will not be able to smell the food you eat. When you eat, the smell has a big factor in how the food tastes. When you chew your food, the scent of the food reaches the nose because of the intersection, which enhances your tasting experience. Many people can't distinguish between an apple and an onion with their nose plugged. The sense of smell affects taste a whole lot. There will be many challenges if the airway and the esophagus don't intersect. That is why God has engineered the airway and the esophagus to intersect. And the uvula controls the intersection in the throat. Isn't that amazing? How would you then solve the 5 problems I just mentioned? A nose would have to be replaced, with a mouth in order for it to talk. Two mouths would be needed instead of a nose. Is the picture on the right more ergonomically designed? What would you do if you were an ergonomist? That's right. The design on the left is a lot more ergonomically designed. The fact that the airway and the esophagus intersect is not a result of chance by a process of evolution. Someone has definitely designed this feature with a purpose and plan. I believe it will be easy for you to discern as well. I did some research on whether God has designed other parts of our bodies in such wonderful and fearful ways. That is why part of the lecture's title is Fearfully Made Body. Let us look at which other parts have such amazing designs. We have been given amazing senses. There are the eyes and ears. There are other senses as well, but let's look at these two senses in particular. All of you have ears, right? Have you thought about whether your ears are designed? Look here. There is a range of sounds that your ears can hear. This range is called audible frequency. Humans can typically hear from 20 Hz until 20,000 Hz. However, animals like elephants and dolphins can hear a wider range of sounds compared to humans. Each part of the ear has significant features. Let's first look at the auricle that is visible. This auricle collects external sound and transmits it inside the ear. You make a cave-like shape with your hand to hear better, right? This actually helps collect the sound into the ear. But your auricle is already designed to do that. The shape of humans' ears is very interesting. I mentioned last time when I talked about math and creation that the ear has a geometrically spherical shape. Fibonacci's spherical design takes on this structure precisely. Next, let's look at this alveoli. The alveoli is a long S-shaped tube that is also very narrow. This is designed this way to prevent bugs and objects from getting in. About a third into the tube, it is the most narrowest, so that bugs and debris can be caught there. When you pick inside your ear, you will feel pain in this area the next day. It is very sensitive, so that you can take immediate measures. It is designed so that the pain sensitivity is highest in that area. Also in the alveoli, the frequency of sounds that fall between 2.5 and 3.0 kilohertz is enhanced. It is enhanced about fourfold, so that the sound is audible. Though it's not labeled here, there is also earwax. The earwax actually protects the ear from water and germs. It also blocks bugs from reaching inside, so it might be harmful if you pick your earwax too deep into the ear. Then even more inside, there is the eardrum. The sound from the alveoli is changed to sounds recognizable by the ear. I've prepared a picture of the eardrum. It is the thinnest part of your body. It can actually repair itself once damaged. It can amplify the sound energy 15 folds. It is about 9 millimeters in length and 0.1 millimeters thin. It is thinner than a fingernail. Going deeper, you can find the ossicles. This is the smallest bone in the body. I prepared a picture for this also. Isn't it cute? For proper scale, it's put on top of a finger. The ossicle is small and detailed. Let us look deeper into the ossicles. There are the malleus, incus, and the stapes. The malleus has the shape of a hammer. Do you know what an anvil is? A blacksmith uses an anvil to hit steel against it. That is what an anvil is. The incus actually looks like an anvil, and the stapes looks like the footrest when you ride a horse. Doesn't it resemble that? the stapes look similar to the footrest on a horse. The ossicles converts the vibration of the air coming through the alveoli into the vibration of human tissue. I've actually prepared an animation. When the sound comes into the eardrum using this principle, the sound is transferred to the auditory nerves. Isn't it amazing? Do you think this can be made by accident? Or do you think someone designed it on purpose? It is definitely designed. The more interesting thing is that between these bones are joints. There are joints between the knees and elbows, right? The joints act as a lubricant between the bones. These three bones shouldn't cause any friction as it moves. That is why the joints are there to reduce the friction. How can something like this be an accident? Someone with infinite wisdom had designed all of this. Look on the right, and you'll find something more amazing. The auditory ossicle is fixed with a ligament so that it doesn't move. It is placed with such detail. Do you really think this is all by accident? Someone has definitely designed all of that. The purpose of that ligament is so that the bones don't move out of place. According to the lever principle, the sound is amplified as it passes through the auditory ossicle. The ratio of the structure inside the ear is 21:3. And using the lever principle, this amplifies the sound 27 folds. Such wisdom can be found in the design of your ear. Do you think this is by accident? And if you look further inside, you can find the cochlea. This cochlea stimulates the auditory hair cells, and it transfers sound signal into electric signal. If you stretch out the cochlea, each part can identify a different range of frequencies. The human ear can distinguish even the difference of 1 hertz. Isn't it amazing? When a piano key is played, there are people who know the exact note. That is how intricately the human ear is designed. The cochlea takes on a helical shape, and this is to reduce the space it takes up. But it is also so that low sounds can be preserved. Someone who knew these principles had designed every part of the ear. Look at this interesting auditory cell. When the auditory cell is vibrated, the hairs on it also move. There are long hairs and short hairs. When the auditory cell vibrates, the long hairs open up, allowing calcium and kalium to enter. This helps transfer the vibrations to electrical signals. This allows the brain to understand the sound. Humans are not even aware of such design in our small cells. The ear not only picks up sound, but it also helps people with their balance. The vestibular organ helps a person be aware of the balance of the body, including when it spins or accelerates in speed. So if you feel dizzy, there is probably something wrong with your ear. The vestibular organ has a structure that is in 3 axes and has a shape of half a ring. No matter how the body moves, it is able to identify the movement. Also, inside the vestibular organ is a small stone called the otolith. When the body moves, the otolith moves as well. So it is able to identify the body's movement. Don't you feel carsick when you drive a long time? You feel dizzy when the movement of your body doesn't match your sight. That's when you become dizzy. That is because of this small bone in your ear. Who do you think put this small stone in your ear? Yourself? Or did your mother put it in there when you were a baby? No. Someone designed it and put that small stone in your ear. Why do you think we have 2 ears? What would happen if there was only 1 ear? Try blocking just one of your ears. Listen to me while blocking 1 ear. You'll lose your sense of direction. Hearing without sight makes it difficult to identify where the speaker is. But even without sight, you know the location of the mosquito or fly. This is possible because with your two ears, you can discern the location of the fly or mosquito as it flies around the air. Look at this diagram here. The ear can determine the location of the sound by discerning the slight difference of the sound as it changes. Were you trained to do this? Are you trained to determine the location of such sounds as the location changes, or do your ears just know how to do this? God has designed and created your ears so that it can do that. Do you still think that your ears have been made by accident? Someone has delicately designed this ear of yours. There is a saying, your eyes are worth 90% of the whole body. That is how precious one's sight is. Let us observe with which principles the eyes are able to see. The human eyes have limited sight. Light has a very wide range of color spectrum. What is visible to us is a very small part of the whole spectrum. This is called visible light. Human eyes can see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Colors that are beyond red are called infrared, while colors beyond violet are called ultraviolet. These are colors that are not visible to the human eye. The reason why you see an apple as red is because the apple absorbs all colors except for the color red, which is reflected off of the apple, then to the eye. The eye can detect the color red because that is the color reflected to the eye. The eye structure is designed as the diagram shows. It's like the structure of a camera. Actually, the eye existed first, and the camera has copied it. Let's look at the structure of the eye. The cornea is the most outer layer of the eye. This layer protects the eye. It also accounts for 70% of the eye's focus. The interesting thing is that for the eye to pick up light, there must be no veins on the cornea. How then is oxygen provided to the cornea? Oxygen is provided to the cornea through tears. Isn't that amazing? There is the iris inside the cornea, which acts like the aperture of a camera. It controls the amount of light entering the eye. The iris opens up in the dark. You've probably seen this in the mirror before. This iris is very delicate. The pupil opens up or closes according to the amount of light. An iris reaction test is performed when checking the brain's function. Also, the iris is used for security technology, right? The iris is used like the fingerprint by biotechnology, which gives security access. That shows the delicateness of the iris's design. There is the lens inside the iris. The lens bends the light so that it falls on the retina. The lens also needs to be clear, so there can be no vein in it. Though there is not a single vein in the lens, it is designed so that it does not rot while receiving oxygen. Deeper inside, there is an area for the optic nerve, which is called the retina. In the retina, there are two types of optic nerves. One is called the cone cell, and the other the rod cell. Smartphones these days come out with two cameras, right? One camera controls the light, while the other controls the color. In the same way, the cone cell identifies colors, while the rod cell identifies the brightness of the light. The eye has approximately 7 million cone cells. This is like having 7 megapixels. The eye also has 130 million rod cells. How many is that if you combine the two? That's 140 million cells, right? The human eye can see the world in 140 megapixels. The image may change as it passes through your brains. But the reason why you can see in clear detail is due to the optic nerves. This is the process of how the optic nerve delivers light to the brain. This is a very simple diagram. It looks quite complicated, right? This shows how the brain processes all of the nerves and instantly recognizes the object visible to the eye. If you try to simulate this on a computer, it actually takes a long time to calculate this complicated process. However, the eye can do this literally in the blink of an eye. We possess such a brain and a set of eyes. Isn't that truly amazing? Recently, Samsung announced that it developed a sensor that has 180 megapixels. It's a mobile image sensor. It's currently embedded into the Samsung Galaxy. If it has 100 megapixels, then that means it has 100 million cells. How many cells does the human eye have? The eye has more than 100 million cells. That is how a dual camera was developed, copying the human eyes. One lens identifies color while the other identifies light. These days, there are wide-angle and long-angle cameras. So there are 4 to 5 cameras embedded on the smartphone. But did you know just one of our eyes can do all of that? Isn't that amazing? These cameras are designed by a person, right? Our eyes are better than these cameras. How can all this be just an accident? Our eyes are also intricately designed by God. Do you know about the 3 primary colors? Red, blue, and yellow? If you combine all this, it becomes black. Do you know the 3 primary colors of light? Red, blue, and green. If you combine all 3, it becomes white. The cone cells are designed very intricately so that it can identify the 3 primary colors of light. There are different cells that are each sensitive to red, blue, and green. The combination of these 3 colors makes it possible to see other colors. When analyzed as a wavelength, these are the results. You had to learn that the primary colors of light were red, blue, and green. How then do the cone cells react so sensitively to the 3 primary colors of light? This is possible because someone who knew about the 3 colors of light had created and designed our eyes. The one on the top are the colors that a normal person can see. If there is something wrong with the cone cells, it will look like the bottom ones. These are called color blindness or color amblyopia. You've probably done this test before. What's the number here? It's 12. What about this? It's 29. What about this? It's 97. If you got all 3 correct, that means your cone cells are working well. What about this? You're not so sure. It's normal to not know what it is. The colors that the human eye can see are natural colors. What about dogs? The dog's vision will be similar to the picture on the right. It's not totally gray, but it can only discern about 40 colors. Dogs have very weak vision. That is why they depend on their sense of smell. What about cats? Cats are nocturnal, so they can see better at night. Their sight is sensitive to gray, green, and blue. What about bulls? During a bullfight, you see the matador waving the red cape. So most think that the bull can see the color red, but that's not true. The bull cannot see the color red, so that is not why it gets angry. The bull gets excited because of the movement of the cape. As opposed to the sight of animals that can only see gray or limited colors, the human eye can see all the natural colors in this picture. Aren't you all very thankful? Being able to see this wonderful world is a gift from God. How long does it take for the eye to blink? It only takes about 0.3 seconds. Also, it only takes 0.013 seconds for the eye to identify an object. This means you can identify an object less than the time your eye blinks. I brought a picture. Try to identify what's inside the picture. I'm going to check later. Pay close attention. It's going to go by fast. About 8 pictures will pass by very quickly. Let me show you again. You saw them, right? What kind of flower did you see? I've experimented this on several people. Most said they saw the picture on the left. Humans have the eye to detect an object in such a short time. Here's another interesting thing. How quickly do you think can the cone cells detect light? What is the least amount of light it can detect? It is 100 photons. A photon is a unit of light. 1 photon is actually a very small amount of light. It's smaller than we imagine. But the cone cell can detect light with 100 of these photons. What about the rod cells? The rod cell distinguishes black from white in light. A rod cell can detect light even if there's only 1 photon. I'm referring to an article of scientists having experimented with this. The human eye is so sensitive that it can even detect just 1 photon of light. Isn't that amazing? The camera that we use today took hundreds of years through knowledge accumulated over time. Who would say that this camera was made by chance? No one, right? The human eye is actually so much more intricate, complicated, and automated. How can such an eye be a result of chance? This is proof that someone must have designed them with intricate detail. The ears and eyes are 2 body parts that detect different senses. They are also amazingly and beautifully engineered. Charles Darwin actually explained in his Origin of Species, "I know how absurd it is to assume that eyes, an intimate invention that adjusts focus to different distances and amount of light and adapts to differences in spherical surface and chromatic aberration, have been made by natural selection." Though Darwin wrote about evolution, he thought this was ridiculous, how such an intricate eye could have been made by chance through evolution. The Bible talks about the eyes that see and the ears that hear. Ears that hear and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Let's look at the expression, fearful and wonderfully, again. This describes the mystery and beauty which causes astonishment. The more we explore our own bodies, the more we are struck by awe. There is something that I want to talk more about today. If God has designed your bodies in such a wonderful and fearful way, don't you think God would have designed our lives as well? What do you think of your lives? Do you think your lives are wonderful and beautiful? Some of you might think that every day is a painful day. I believe if God has designed our bodies, He has also designed our lives. If that's true, shouldn't you try to know what God's design is for your life, rather than trying to design this difficult and tiresome life of yours? I hope this can be a time where you can look into this. I actually counsel a lot of students. Some students come to me and ask, "Mr. Kang, with what perspective should I read the Bible?" So I talked to this one student about that topic. I'm going to share with you about the talk we had. Let's first read from the book of Deuteronomy. "Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years. to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. When Moses was speaking, he was right in front of Canaan, the land God promised the Israelites. Does Moses enter the land or not? He does not enter. This is the scene where Moses is preaching his last sermon. Let's say you are going to die soon. You've wandered the desert for the past 40 years, and your descendants must enter the promised land. How would you feel? Is this a joke? No. You would have been very deliberate in order to spend the remainder of your life to speak to them so that they would successfully settle down in Canaan. There were many things that had happened during the past 40 years. A whole generation had passed. God had punished the Israelites many times, and He had guided them as well. This passage is part of the summary of what God has done for them. Is this passage spoken from the perspective of Moses? Or from the perspective of Aaron, who was beside Moses? Or was it from the perspective of the Israelites? No. Though it is Moses speaking, it is spoken from the perspective of God. Moses is not saying, "Don't you know how difficult it was for me during the time in the desert?" Moses is speaking from the standpoint of God and how God has guided them through the time in the desert. Today, I want to talk about perspective. The dictionary definition of the word perspective is a particular attitude towards something, a way of thinking about something. The following examples are used when talking about perspective. If you see the black, then you will see the shape of two people. But if you see the white, you will see an oil lamp. This looks like a duck, but can also be seen as a rabbit. This is also a very famous picture. You can see a young lady or either an old lady. The angle of the light determines whether the shadow is the thinker or the David statue. This can be explained as having different perspectives. This is not the type of perspective which I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about a different type of perspective. Let me ask you a question. Which of the following is considered by art experts as the greatest work of art? I'm showing you 4 pictures right now. If you were an art expert, which work would you consider to be the greatest work of art? Think about it. The first one is the famous Mona Lisa. The second is the card players. It might be different now, but until recently, it was valued to be about $250 million. Would you buy this painting for $250 million? The third one is called Las Meninas by Velázquez. The fourth one is also very famous. It is Da Vinci's The Last Supper. Which one do you think is the greatest work of art? In 1985, art experts gathered together, and they conceded that the greatest work of art was Les Meninas, the third picture. This piece of art won by a landslide. This painting is not very famous in Korea, but actually it is a very popular and beloved work of art. It was replicated about 40 times by the great Picasso, and it gave inspiration to a lot of people. It is hung today in Spain's Prado Art Gallery. Many people have gathered together to see this painting. From the scale of a person, it is a very big piece of art. In the picture, you can see a frame-like object, which is a mirror. The two people in the mirror are King Philip IV and the Queen. Where do you actually think were the king and queen? That's right. They were probably standing in front of the painting. The girl in the middle is the 6-year-old Princess Margarita, their daughter. Besides her are the princess's maids. And there is a performer on the right who is trying to do something. The dog is bored and is falling asleep. The butler is coming in and out of the room offering his services. The interesting thing about this work is that the artist himself is in the picture, thinking to draw something in the big canvas. Let me ask you a question. Do you see the back of the giant canvas in the picture? What do you think is the artist drawing in this canvas? That is the question. There is no right answer, but use your imagination. I'm going to give you an example, so try to think. If the king and queen are reflected in the mirror, they're in front of the picture. Let's say they are standing as the model of the artist. Imagine that you are the king and queen. The artist is then painting for quite a long time. You would probably have to stand there for days on end. For those days, you can't take care of country's affairs, and you won't be able to hug your beautiful daughter either. The maids are distracting the princess so she doesn't look for her mother. Let's say you stood there for a long time. And let's pretend the artist is finished and he is going to show the painting. The artist has told you, the painting is finished. But you find the artist has painted himself in the canvas. What would you do if you were the king? You would probably throw him in prison, right? The king had the authority to even kill people back then. How dare the artist paint himself when you've stood for so long? A king would be furious, and rightfully so. What if the artist did actually paint the king and queen? What would you do? You would think, job well done, it is just as I had expected. But what if after the painting is done, and the artist says, "Oh king, this is the painting I've been working on." The artist shows you the painting, and the result is the picture in the middle. How would you respond if the picture in the middle was the final product? You would be speechless, right? You will think, what is that? How interesting. You would be amazed by the work of art as time goes by. Whose perspective is the picture in the middle? It is painted from the perspective of the king. Let's say the artist imagined and painted from the perspective of the king. In the painting, there is the beloved princess and even the artist. The butler is there and the performer that entertains people. And you are painted in the mirror as well. In the beginning, you might be confused by the result of the painting. However, as time goes by, you are captivated by the work of art. Look at that painting again, and imagine that the middle picture is in the canvas. It makes it quite interesting, right? Isn't it wonderful and fearful? In this life, people also paint a picture called life. We are also artists that paint. When your life is over, you present your painting in front of the king. What kind of painting do you think would be on the canvas of your life? Some people would draw themselves like the first picture. They only know themselves. They are the center of their lives. Everything in this world moves according to their interests. He must do what he wants, and he must be known to be satisfied. Other people's interests don't exist inside of them. They are only concerned about their family and their children. Such a person will be satisfied only by doing what they want. Such a painting is where everything revolves around that person. That's the kind of life this person has painted. What about the second picture? The second picture is a normal life that can be imagined by anyone. Such people pursue what is important to them. It is a very realistic and rational life. This person gazes upon the king, but they are not able to see others. The purpose of serving the king is so that he himself and his children will have a future that is successful and ensured. Most people will probably live this kind of life. But there are people who live a life similar to the third picture. I've seen a lot of such people. A person who is able to see from the king's perspective, a person who can see oneself and also the interest of the community. This person objectively knows their place and role, so they form a community and live in the midst of others. The life of such a person is truly fearful and wonderful. What kind of life are you painting? I hope you can reflect upon your life during this time. When you see this painting, imagine that this painting is in the artist's giant canvas. Doesn't that make this painting into such a beautiful piece of art? I think that is why art experts had selected this painting to be the greatest work of art in the history of all mankind. Actually, no one really knows what is in the artist's canvas. There are many books and essays that explain about this painting. This is a replica of the painting done by Picasso. He probably reinterpreted the meaning of this painting. Various replicas are done on this painting. One literary writer was inspired by this painting, so he even created literature based on this painting. And this is a magazine of a Spanish mall that has parodied the painting. Let's observe once again about the meaning of perspective. Perspective is a particular attitude towards something, a way of thinking about something. What then is the definition of the perspective of God? It is an attitude of God towards something, a way of thinking of God about something. Life is difficult because you perceive the world from your own standpoint. But God did not design your life like that. Let us match the Bible verse in the painting we just saw. From whose perspective was that painting done by? It's not painted from the artist's perspective. It is painted by the perspective of the king. From whose perspective is the Bible passage on the right written by? Though written by Moses, it wasn't from his perspective. It was written from the perspective of God. The painting and the passage are created from the same perspective. That is why this painting inspires us. It has left its mark to be the greatest work of art. And that is why the Bible is the greatest masterpiece in all of history. Let us remember these two facts as we read the following passage. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years, to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your father had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. We can see the lives of two people here. We don't know what kind of lives these two people lived. Some people design their lives to live their own lives. Some people perceive themselves from God's perspective. They design their lives by looking out for the interest of others and the community. Are you tired and devastated in your life? Do you have no one to call a friend in this journey called life? Are you lonely? Are you worried about your future? Do you spend sleepless nights because of your children? All this happens to you because you didn't design your life properly. What if someone has designed the functions of your bodies? If your nose and eyes have a designer, don't you think your life has a designer as well? Why don't you think about this during this time? The Creator that has created you has designed your life as well. From that perspective, your life can be changed as well. Your life can be fearfully and wonderfully made. Let's think about this during this time. I hope your life can be fearfully and wonderfully made. Thank you.
Are children taught how to do bad things? No, they just lie, hate others, and hit others all on their own. Why? This is because of sin. There is sin in humans' spiritual DNA. When we have been restored again in God's image, an eternal and new life is given to us.